Every so often I work on a project that doesn't really go to plan, so today I thought I would share one of those. I've got this old lampshade which came with the house when we bought it, so I'm going to completely deconstruct it. This part I think I'm going to be using for another project in the future, but the reason I took this apart is for this. This is what's going to let me make the rest of the lampshade and mean that I can easily put it up afterwards. The next thing I'm going to be using is some yucca, and I think that's how you pronounce it. I've got two different kinds. These I borrowed from my mum's garden, and I've got two different kinds, one which is a thicker, stiffer plant, and then the other pale green one, which is much more flexible. So I'm going to take these, separate them into two piles, and then I'm going to be breaking each of these leaves in two and then repeating this until they're all very thin, and I can use it to weave the lampshade. A few of the leaves had a bit of a mouldy type thing at the very bottom of them, so I just cut this off since I'm really quite allergic to mould and I don't want to risk it, and I kept separating all the leaves until they were in very thin strips. The stiffer, darker leaves were what I wanted to use to make a frame to weave everything else over, so I put that around the wire and then I stapled it into place because that was the only thing I could think to use at the time. And it kind of worked, it held them in place, but then later on, once I'd added more of these leaves to give more of a, I guess, a kind of bone structure to the lampshade, I tried weaving around the edge and it didn't really work, because once I'd weaved around it I needed to change it so that I could make the shape go a bit more like a bowl, and I hadn't separated the leaves thin enough. As you can see, these are quite thick, and then when I tried to take those leaves and make it more of a bowl shape, everything went pear-shaped. It did not work out, so I ended up having to take everything off and starting again the day after. Once I'd started again the day after, some of those leaves had dried so much that the staples had just pinged off entirely or weren't holding them very well. So instead what I did is I switched to some little copper wiring which I had in a craft box, which I need to use up. I've got a craft box which are all kinds of tools and equipment that I want to use up and make sure that I use rather than just sitting somewhere collecting dust. So I thought, great, I can use this. So I took out the staple and then wrapped the wiring around those to hold it into place and make sure that it wasn't going to go anywhere. After that, I took the yucca and split it even more. So as you can see, it's much smaller, and kept weaving it and wove it as tightly as I could to make sure that I had a really firm ring starting around at the bottom. And I kept doing this. I did this for about an hour. I think it took a long time. After a while it got a little bit hard doing this straight onto the ground, so I got one of my glass jars, and to be honest, if you're trying to replicate this, which hopefully you'll have slightly better results than I did, you might want to use something which isn't glass and quite so smashy. And I put this on top so I could start curving the edges and then carried on. At this point, Potato decided he wanted to join me and try and eat the yucca plant because clearly it was driving me nuts, which made everything a little bit more interesting, but I was quite close to finishing it off at this point, so I thought, okay, let's just keep going. And this is the part where it all went wrong. I should have just not switched to the thicker leaves. I got a little bit impatient and I just thought, if I use bigger leaves this will go faster. Instead, what just happened is the lamp ended up looking quite scrawny. So I just accepted the fact that it's not going to look very good. So I just took all those leaves which are now sticking out and curled them around each other and went round the entire lampshade with that. that's my humiliated basket, which is trying to masquerade as a lampshade. It's it's interesting looking. As it is, my son seems to love it. Every time he sees it, he just starts giggling, which isn't really the response I want. But to be honest, it's still better than having no lampshade at all. So I guess for the moment it's going to do until I can replace it with something decent. So today I just thought I would share the worst thing I've ever made, and at the very least I hope you find it entertaining.